Power has given us unforgettable leaders, betrayals, and stories of ambition that turned into tragedy. But one character, Felipe Lobos, was never just another villain. He was chaos in human form, a man who laughed at death while commanding an empire. And yet, his story was left as fragments, unexplored, incomplete. The real rise of Lobos is not just about drugs or power. It's about timing. His rise should only come after the world of power origins is fully laid down. Because before the empire, before the chaos, we need to understand the soil that allowed someone like Lobos to bloom. When you think about the power universe, you think about Ghost's ambition, Tommy's loyalty and rage, Kanan's survival instincts, and a New York City caught between the streets and the penthouses. Each character had layers that made them more than criminals. They were dreamers, survivors, or even visionaries of their own making. The show built its reputation on showing us how crime wasn't just about fast money, but about family, trust, betrayal, and the cost of reaching too high. But then, there was Felipe Lobos. Unlike Ghost or Tommy, Lobos didn't come to us with a long emotional journey. He was different. He was eccentric, dangerous, and unpredictable. From the first moment he appeared, he felt like he was playing by a set of rules no one else understood. His charisma was strange, almost theatrical, but behind that laughter was a mind always calculating. He wasn't the man on the corner hustling to survive. He was already a kingpin, a cartel boss who lived above the chaos while feeding it. That's what made Lobos stand out. He didn't need our sympathy or backstory to make him compelling. Every time he showed up, he brought tension. He was the reminder that Ghost's ambitions were small compared to the forces waiting above him. Lobos wasn't just an obstacle. He was the system Ghost wanted to climb into, the higher level of power that few ever reached. Still, we were only given glimpses of who Lobos really was. We never learned how he built his cartel. We never saw how he became the man who could control so much with a smile and a threat. We were left with questions. What made him this way? Where did his madness come from? How did he rise above the streets into an empire that stretched beyond New York? This is why his story deserves more. Power Origins has already shown us how the roots of the empire were planted in New York, the struggles, the alliances, the betrayals that shaped the city's underworld. But Lobos? He represents something bigger. His rise is about crossing borders, running global networks, and showing us how crime looks when it's no longer local, but international. Yet, telling his story without setting the stage would be empty. If we rush into Lobos without first understanding the ground level. Without seeing the way Ghost, Tommy, and Kanan built their world, then his story loses meaning. Lobos Kanan. Power Origins is more than just another spin-off. It's the foundation stone, the moment the audience gets to see how the legends of Ghost, Tommy, and Kanan were actually built. Origins takes us back in time, stripping away the glamour and the polish of the later years, and dropping us into the raw, uncertain, and violent beginnings of everything we came to know in Power. It's not about the drug empire at its peak. It's about the very first moves, the first bad decisions, the first deals that would eventually shape an entire empire. Think about Ghost, before he was Ghost. Before the suits, before the clubs, before the carefully calculated double life, there was just James St. Patrick, a young man trying to balance ambition with loyalty, hunger with survival. Origins lets us see him before the legend, while the cracks in his identity were still forming. It's here that the real tragedy of his life begins. Every choice he makes in this period feels heavier, because we already know where it will eventually lead. Then there's Tommy. Origins gives us Tommy not as the explosive partner we all know, but as the reckless young man who didn't yet understand what loyalty would cost him. He was pure fire, raw emotion, and untamed aggression. In Origins, his edges aren't smooth, they're sharp, dangerous, and often aimed at the wrong people. Watching him in these early days tells us why he became so fiercely loyal to Ghost later, and why betrayal would one day hurt him even deeper. And of course, Kanan. Origins is where we see Kanan's rise from the streets, where survival wasn't optional, it was the only rule. He wasn't yet the manipulative, feared kingpin who shaped Tarek's future. He was a young hustler, learning quickly that the game had no mercy. For Kanan, Origins shows us the making of a predator. Every choice he makes teaches him a lesson that will harden him into the man we later see in power. But the real weight of Origins isn't just about the characters. It's about the environment, the New York City that shaped them. This wasn't the glamorous city of high-rises and luxury apartments. This was the city where poverty, corruption, and crime collided. The neighborhoods were war zones, where teenagers carried guns, and loyalty was worth more than money. It's in this city that Ghost, Tommy, and Kanan learned the rules of survival: trust nobody completely, always move 3 steps ahead, and understand that the game will eat you alive if you hesitate. Power Origins reminds us that empires don't appear out of thin air. They're built brick by brick, mistake by mistake, betrayal by betrayal. By showing us these foundations, Origins makes the later Power series richer. When we eventually see Ghost rise, Tommy explode, or Kanan manipulate, we understand not just what they do, but why they do it. Their pain, their loyalty, their ambition, it all begins in Origins. And that's exactly why Lobos' rise should never come before it. Without the grounding of Origins, Lobos. Every empire has its foundation, and every villain needs the right stage. Felipe Lobos is not the kind of character you can throw into a story without context. He's not a man who starts small and grinds his way up from the corner. He enters the Power universe already at the top, already feared, already controlling an empire that stretches far beyond the blocks of New York City. That's why his story only makes sense after we've seen Power Origins. Because without that foundation, his rise becomes disconnected. We lose the weight of his impact. Origins is the blueprint, the map of how power in New York was built. It shows us the streets, the loyalty, the betrayals, and the fragile alliances that form the roots of the game. Without those roots, Lobos is just another cartel boss. But with them, he becomes something more. He's not just a villain. He's the storm that arrives after the foundation has been laid, shaking everything we thought we understood about control. Think of it like this. If Origins is the story of building the house, then Lobos is the fire that tests its strength. His rise doesn't exist in isolation, it exists in contrast. Ghost, Tommy, and Kanan built their world brick by brick. Lobos didn't build, he conquered. He took what was already fragile and bent it to his will. By waiting until after Origins, the audience will already understand the rules of the game. That makes Lobos' breaking of those rules even more terrifying. There's also the matter of perspective. In Origins, we watch characters struggle with survival. We see the human side of the drug game, the ambition, the hunger, the need to escape poverty or claim respect. By the time Lobos enters, we're no longer dealing with survival. We're dealing with domination. Lobos represents the shift from local to global, from the hustle of the block to the machinery of international cartels. To show his rise too early would rob the story of this natural progression. And then there's the tension. Storytelling thrives on escalation. The audience has to feel like the stakes are always getting higher. If we start with Lobos before Origins, we give away too much too soon. His story needs the foundation of Origins to feel like the next level, the final boss of the narrative climb. Watching Lobos move in the shadows of a world we already know makes his rise chilling. We recognize how dangerous he is because we've already seen how fragile the empire beneath him can be. Finally, placing Lobos' rise after Origins allows us to deepen his impact as a villain. His eccentric behavior, his twisted sense of humor, his unpredictability, those qualities hit harder when the audience has already seen the normal struggles of Ghost, Tommy, and Kanan. Lobos isn't normal. He's not a hustler with dreams. He's a man who sees the world as a game and treats life and death like playthings. To appreciate that madness, we first need to understand the order he disrupts. Origins provides that order. Lobos brings Felipe Lobos is not your typical villain. He isn't cold and quiet like Ghost, nor fiery and impulsive like Tommy, nor calculating and manipulative like Kanan. Lobos is a different breed. He blends charm with madness, comedy with cruelty. He is the kind of man who could order your death while laughing about what outfit he'll wear tomorrow. That unpredictability is what makes him terrifying. But to truly appreciate that side of Lobos, his story needs to come after we've already explored the struggles of origins. Here's why: villains don't exist in a vacuum. They are measured against the world around them. Ghost's ambition feels larger because of the dangerous environment he rose from. Tommy's rage feels sharper because we saw the betrayals that fueled it. Kanan's cunning feels colder because we witnessed the survival lessons he learned on the street. For Lobos, his eccentricity, his recklessness, his cruelty. None of that would carry weight unless we've already lived inside the gritty, grounded reality of origins. Once we've seen the human side of the power universe, Lobos becomes the contrast, the man who has lost all connection to morality or sanity. This is where villain evolution comes in. Origins shows us how regular men become something more, whether that's a kingpin, a survivor, or a soldier. Lobos, however, is not an evolution of the street. He is the final product of years of violence, wealth, and unchecked power. By placing his story after origins, the audience can trace the full path, from hustlers struggling for respect to an empire led by a man who doesn't even play by human rules. He represents what happens when power grows too big, when corruption is no longer local but international. And the beauty of telling his story later is that it lets us dive deeper into his psychology. Who was Lobos before the empire? Was he always eccentric, or did the violence of his rise shape his twisted personality? Was his humor a mask, a shield against fear, or was it genuine madness? These are the questions a Lobos spinoff could finally answer. But the answers will only land if we already know the world he steps into. Without that context, he's just another villain. With it, he becomes unforgettable. Villains in great storytelling often mirror the heroes. Joker mirrors Batman. Gus Fring mirrors Walter White. In the same way, Lobos mirrors Ghost. Ghost was precise, controlled, a man obsessed with appearances. Lobos was chaotic, flamboyant, and completely unconcerned with appearances. Ghost saw power as order. Lobos saw power as play. The two represent opposite sides of ambition, and that contrast is what makes their clash so compelling. But again, that clash only hits harder once we've seen Ghost's origin story in full. Without Ghost's foundation, Lobos loses his mirror. So when we talk about villain evolution in the power universe, Lobos isn't the beginning. He's the escalation. He's the proof that power corrupts differently depending on the man. So, what would fans actually gain from seeing the rise of Felipe Lobos after Power Origins? The answer is simple: everything we were missing. Because Lobos was never meant to be a background player. He was always more than a villain who showed up, made threats, and disappeared in violence. His presence hinted at a much larger world, a world of cartels, international dealings, and power games far beyond New York City. Giving him his own rise story, after Origins, fills the gaps and expands the universe in a way no other character can. First, fans would finally understand the architecture of Lobos' empire. We've seen Ghost and Tommy hustle their way up from street corners, but Lobos' rise would take us into different terrain, into Mexico, South America, Europe, the hidden corridors of international power. We would see how he built the logistics. The routes, the soldiers, the connections with corrupt officials, the way he used charm and intimidation to weave himself into the fabric of the global drug trade. Every great empire has a blueprint, and Lobos' blueprint would be unlike anything else we've seen in Power. Second, we would get to witness the birth of his eccentric personality. In Power, Lobos was unpredictable, blending humor with cruelty, wearing his madness like a crown. But where did that come from? Was he always theatrical, always laughing in the face of death? Or was it a mask forged in blood, shaped by betrayals and assassinations. Fans would finally see the scars beneath the performance. His rise story could explore moments of loss, fear, or even humanity, moments that explain why he chose madness as his armor. Third, we'd see his first encounters with the networks that Ghost, Tommy, and Kanan would later depend on. Imagine watching Lobos set the stage, laying down the same drug routes that Ghost would later risk his life to control. Imagine seeing Lobos negotiate with ruthless efficiency, making deals that ripple into the events of the original Power series. It's not just fan service, it's connecting dots, showing us how the chessboard was built long before Ghost ever moved his first piece. And then comes the emotional payoff. Origins grounds the story in struggle, young men fighting to survive, clawing their way up from nothing. Lobos' rise, in contrast, would be the tragedy of ambition without limits. Unlike Ghost, who wanted legitimacy, or Tommy, who wanted loyalty, Lobos wanted control, dominance, and chaos. His story would reveal what happens when ambition is unchained, when there's no loyalty to hold a man back, no family to tether him, no dream beyond raw power. That's why his rise hits harder after Origins. It shows us the natural escalation, the darker path power can take. Finally, for fans, it's about closure. Lobos' character in Power ended with unanswered questions. He was killed before we truly understood him. His story was unfinished, his potential left on the table. A Rise series gives the audience what they were denied. The story of Felipe Lobos was never meant to be small. He wasn't the kind of character who faded into the background or blended into the crowd. He was magnetic, dangerous, eccentric, and unforgettable. But the truth is, the way we saw him in Power was only half the story. The other half, the most important half, was never told. His rise. His empire. His transformation into the unpredictable kingpin who haunted Ghost's every move. And that is why the rise of Felipe Lobos can't come before Power Origins. It has to come after. Because storytelling is about layers. First, you need the soil, the foundations, the roots, the struggles of men like Ghost, Tommy, and Kanan. That's what Origins gives us. It shows us the cost of survival, the ambition of young men who wanted more, and the city that shaped them. Only when we understand those struggles can we appreciate what Lobos truly represents. He is not survival. He is not ambition tied to loyalty or family. He is what comes after. The storm, the chaos, the reminder that once you reach the top, there's always someone above you, pulling the strings. Lobos' rise, told after Origins, becomes a reward for the audience. It's the next level of the game, the expansion of the universe. It's proof that the Power Saga is not just about one city or one group of friends, but about a world of crime that stretches far beyond New York. By delaying his story, the writers give his character weight. His rise isn't just another beginning, it's the payoff for everything that came before. And think about what that does for us as fans. It gives closure to a character who felt incomplete. It answers questions we've been asking since his first appearance. It connects threads across the universe, showing us how the blocks of New York tied into global empires. But more importantly, it transforms Lobos from a villain into a symbol. A symbol of chaos, of power without rules, of ambition without limits. His story reminds us that in the Power universe, no one is ever truly safe, not even the kingpins we thought untouchable. So the real question isn't if Lobos deserves his rise story. The real question is when. And the answer is clear. Only after Origins. Only after we've seen Ghost, Tommy, and Kanan build their fragile empires does Lobos' arrival carry its full meaning. Only then does his madness feel like the perfect contrast. Only then does his empire feel like the inevitable shadow that was always waiting. Because Lobos is not the beginning. He is the escalation. He is the proof that power never stays contained, that ambition always grows into something darker. And that's why the rise of Felipe Lobos should come after Power Origins. Not as a side story. Not as an afterthought. but as the final reminder that in this universe, power is never the end, it's only the beginning of chaos.